This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at fulfillrite.com. Hey there, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman, and on this show, we get into how to actually raise money with crowdfunding. What are the best and the greatest entrepreneurs out there that are raising money on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and other crowdfunding sites? What are they doing right? How are they driving traffic? How are they getting pledges? They share with you their hard-earned lessons in the trenches and get to the crux of what it is that you got to do if you want to be successful with this crowdfunding thing. This has been my passion for a while, so I invite you to go and check out some of the other episodes I got out there on the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. We also have a YouTube channel by the same name. If you're interested, I also have a blog, crowdcrux.com, where I document a lot of my teachings. And finally, I've put all of this into a book called the Kickstarter Launch Formula, which you can check out on Audible. You can check out on Amazon. If you want to check out the Audible version, it's crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio, crux.com/Kickstarter audio. That link also takes you to a place where you can actually enroll in a free 30-day trial of Audible, which is pretty dope because then you can learn a bunch of other stuff, whatever you're interested in. I've been reading a lot of books about like psychology and spirituality because I'm really getting into that. So you can read about whatever you want. You can, with your Audible subscription, discover a lot of really great teachers and new content. So if you're interested in a free 30-day trial of Audible, as well as a free copy of the Kickstarter Launch Formula, all you got to do is go to the link crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. So today's podcast, we brought on an individual who has run 12 different crowdfunding campaigns on Kickstarter, as well as a few different other ones, and also on Patreon. So with their most recent campaign, they've raised over $140,000 on Kickstarter, and they also have a Patreon for their company, which is over $6,000 a month, which is pretty impressive. This entire company is designed around not only using crowdfunding as a way to finance their new projects and ventures, but also as a way to engage their actual fans and to create things that are compelling that people love and engage their fans in their work. So with this episode, you're going to learn a lot about how to actually engage a raving fan community, some of the tricks and techniques that these guys have discovered when it comes to putting together a killer crowdfunding campaign page, making a great offering, and sort of the psychology behind getting people to take action now rather than waiting around. But I think the vulnerable aspects that business owners do not talk about. You know, it's kind of like a hush-hush behind closed doors, but there are so many things that can happen to you as a business owner. And actually, today's guest was extremely, I think, great and humble about sharing an experience where one of his employees actually kind of hurt his business to a degree, and he had to learn and grow from that. And that's really, I think, changed him and improved him a lot as a leader, and some of the lessons that he's going to share with you there on today's episode. I hope you enjoy today's podcast episode. At the end of this episode, I will also share with you a link where if you want to contact me one-on-one and you want to work with me one-on-one and talk about your specific project and what it is you're trying to do, I will share a link for that at the end of today's podcast episode. But without further ado, let's learn, number one, how to launch a killer crowdfunding campaign. And also, if you're interested in subscription crowdfunding with Patreon, how to do that. And it's coming up right after this. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we're speaking with a legendary Kickstarter and crowdfunding entrepreneur who has launched a bunch of different crowdfunding campaigns. They've created more than 10 campaigns on Kickstarter. This is their 12th for JourneyQuest 4. The epic fantasy continues with a hilarious fourth season, and I will let Ben tell you a little bit more about that, the brains behind this project. Ben, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. So JourneyQuest 4, our latest Kickstarter on this account. We've also, we manage another account for slightly different things and have also done some consulting. So I actually have several campaigns going right now. JourneyQuest began in 2010 as a completely fan-supported show. We're now on to our fourth season. People have put millions of dollars in aggregate over the years into supporting the ongoing telling of this story. We're now on Amazon Prime Video. We got our start on YouTube.
Wow. And
people have been coming back for 9 years because they love the characters and they love that what we do is all about the community and all about how, as a community, we can accomplish more together than we can on our own.
That's incredible, man. That's also really in line with like the Kickstarter ethos, if you will. What's been your role with these different types of projects?
Sure. So what makes this pretty unusual is we were doing Kickstarter before Kickstarter. In fact, we crowdfunded our first feature film together, get this, in 1999.
What? Really? Wow.
Yeah. I went around and collected $20 cash in person from hundreds of people to raise the money for the film that got our company started.
The original crowdfunding. Yeah.
So it's been a part of our kind of DNA from the beginning, and from the beginning, we've really thought about it in terms of this community-focused perspective. It's very easy to think of Kickstarter as a way to get some cool merch or as a way to pre-order a product, but our perspective is all about how do we bring people together.
100%. I think too, like there are a lot of other avenues. Like you have your fingers in a lot of pies here. Like it looks like you also have a Patreon account here for Zombie Orpheus.
That's right. Yeah, we have a Patreon that keeps us going on a monthly basis, and that now has become kind of the supporting capital to allow us to launch the Fantasy Network in partnership with a few other companies, because we looked out there and said, we have all these streaming platforms that are trying to be another Netflix, and they all kind of want to have their walled garden, but we're all about sharing. We're all about reaching new people. We're all about not being behind a paywall. And so we designed our own service that's then connected directly to the Patreon, but anyone can get in from anywhere, to allow us to reach the audience directly. And we now have filmmakers from all over the world who have their content on the platform, who are using it, not only to get it seen, but it's essentially a mechanism for us to build an audience of passionate crowdfunders for independent fantasy films. So every time we do a Kickstarter campaign, we offer, as rewards, subscriptions to the Fantasy Network. So we know when we premiere the film on there, those people are going to be not only exposed to, hey, here's this cool film we made, but here are 24 other awesome things that they may love, that they may want to fund in the future.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's pretty crazy. Like you guys are getting a little over $5,000 a month in subscriptions there from Patreon, and then you're running successful crowdfunding campaigns. I think y'all are just overachievers, honestly. Doing too much. Putting me to shame, man. How big is your team, like, working on this, out of curiosity?
Well, it depends on what you mean by this, because we're doing so much, and we're absolutely independent, and so that means we're kind of constantly scraping by. Don't get the impression that we have loads of money to throw around, but so we have 3 people who are just day in, day out working on managing this Kickstarter campaign. We have a small part-time staff with the company. We then have 3 weekly live stream video shows from our studio down in Tacoma that are going, and about 20 to 30 different people rotate through those. And then whenever we're in production, we're going to get up to 50, 60, 70 people who are participating in front of and behind the camera.
Yeah, that's a lot of coordination. Is your kind of role here then, I guess, sort of being the entrepreneurial brains behind this? Do you see yourself as the creative type? How do you see yourself?
Sure. So, my goal with all of this was I wanted to be a film director, and I had stories that I wanted to tell. I wanted to write and direct. And for better or worse, I'm spending most of my time now, as you said, kind of being the entrepreneurial brains. And I put together the plan for how we manage the Kickstarter. I'm behind a lot of kind of how we've thrown copyright totally out the window and said, you know what, if it's on the internet, it's going to be shared. Let's turn that into an advantage instead of a disadvantage. So my role is kind of directing traffic and being the visionary and saying, what's going to be happening in 5 years? What's going to be happening in 10 years? When are people going to get frustrated with how things are done right now? And then how can we position ourselves as an alternative?
Yeah, I think that's actually a very different approach than a lot of people out there. Like most of us want to kind of guard our copyright, and like we're all just super scared about putting anything out there online. But you kind of have taken that different approach of almost like extreme exposure, you know?
Yeah, well, let me give you a couple examples. So, we started off with Creative Commons, but we kept running into problems, especially with the unions. So we ended up having to create our own copyright alternative license, the Shared Cinematic Universe License Agreement, the SCULA, which is available online at scu.la. So I'm super proud of that URL. So we now allow fans to remix and to create derivative works and share, pirate, do almost whatever they want with our works, not only non-commercially, but now commercially. And that has been nothing but an asset for us. When we launched this campaign, we had people reaching out and immediately knowing that they had permission to create amazing fan art that we could share. Or we have someone who has designed and is knitting these incredible knitted miniatures of characters in the campaign. And when we told her, you know what, you can sell these on your Etsy shop, no problem. Here's the license. You don't even have to come to us. You can keep the profits. There was just kind of this moment of astonishment. But at the same time, we know that the more people are engaging with, and to put it in the business language, the more people are engaging with our brands, the more people they're exposing to our brands, and the more people are coming in, discovering these stories and saying, wow, this is phenomenal. Because our core philosophy is, if it's on the internet, it can be pirated. The one thing that cannot be pirated, however, is the future. And the future is always ultimately what we are selling. Here's the next show that we want to do. You've seen everything for free. Now it's up to you to help make it happen. And if people don't step up, it won't happen. And that has been so powerful for us.
That's deep, man. I think also like derivative works are very powerful. Even just thinking about fan fiction, an author having fans write like different types of fiction related to that work. It's always, I think, really complimentary. It's almost kind of like the most incredible applause, if you will. And it's never the same as the original work as well. Like people still want to hear from the original author while they might like reading fan fiction. It's not like the source. So I think that's really smart. I was just going to ask you, like, how is it that you've been able to, aside from these derivative works, maintain such a cult following when it comes to your work?
I mean, at the end of the day, there are a couple of factors. The most important one is we're telling stories that are meaningful to people. The film that put us on the map, The Gamers, back in 2002, 2003, was a comedy about tabletop role-playing. And before that had come out, every time just about that tabletop role-playing had appeared in media, it had been to laugh at, to punch down at the nerds in the basement playing these games. And instead, we came from a perspective of, this is awesome. We're within this hobby. We love this hobby. And there was this... And we went viral in the days before YouTube. We were selling VHS tapes out of our garage and trying to keep up with the global demand, right? But the reason we did is because it spoke to people's experience. They could show this to their friends and their family and say, this is me. This is why I do what I love. And the lesson we've taken with that always has been represent people accurately, represent them honestly, show them in a way that shows you understand, which Hollywood so often fails to do, which television so often fails to do, especially when you're talking about anything at all outside the mainstream. So that focus on representation has really taken us through since that period, and I think that's a huge part of why the audiences stay with us. Awesome stories, awesome characters, and they can see themselves on screen.
I think that's so important. Also, it's something that larger studios just can't do because they have to go after like a wider audience. So you kind of have to dumb down some of the jokes, or you have to have just more of a broader appeal kind of a message. So they don't have the ability to kind of niche down the way you guys are with that.
That's right. We don't have to explain to a grandmother in Kansas how zombie mythology works.
Yeah.
We can just jump in.
Yeah, totally. So I got to ask you like one or two technical questions here. I was looking through your campaign page. I think it's super well designed, man. Do you have any advice to part on the actual crowdfunding campaign page, how to make that pop and stand out?
Sure. Well, for us, the first step with designing a campaign is always math. And I have an extremely complex Excel spreadsheet that I've put together over the last 10 years that allows me to model and project and balance all the different elements of the campaign and make sure that we come out not owing money. So it starts with math, and then the math informs, in many cases, the structure of the campaign page. So you've looked at that and you've seen we start with kind of this animated GIF header that contains the whole message of the campaign in one, with some cool inset videos, and it's easily accessible. You read that, you don't have to read anything else. So having a way to contain the core message in a way that you can view on one single screen without having to scroll, I think is where we start. After that, we do complicated campaigns. So being able to jump from there to here's exactly what's happening right now. We've all had the experience of scrolling and scrolling and scrolling on a campaign, trying to find a particular piece of information. And I always want people to know, here's what's up. So we have what's happening now. Then we jump to a full table of contents that we keep updated throughout the campaign. So if people are looking for specific information, they can link right to it. And then we kind of get into your traditional campaign structure. And yes, it's long, but we use lots of graphics to break it up. We use animated GIFs to break it up. And that's essentially it. There's nothing hugely revolutionary about it. It's just organization.
I think, too, the thing that kind of stands out to me is there's a distinct look and feel to the project, even as I'm scrolling it down. Like, just kind of like the background images you're using, the fonts, the way it looks, it kind of like accentuates the vibe you're going for a little bit, you know?
Sure. Well, it's like designing a movie. You want to have a consistent look and feel. So in this case, we got there by hitting my head against the wall for a couple weeks in Photoshop until we found a look that worked. And you'll see that this look that we've designed isn't just on the campaign page. If you watch the campaign video, you'll see that same style within it. If you watch any of the live streams, you'll see that we've built overlays and lower thirds and all the other pieces that match it. So when we embed those Facebook Live videos, or we're streaming on Twitch or anything, there's a consistency across the whole thing that lets people know we're now kind of within the universe of funding JourneyQuest 4.
The other cool thing is just looking through like on your quests and stuff, like even just their like cool personality you guys add to these, like Onward or Ask the Oracle, Stab the live stream. Like it just kind of feels like you're almost like part of a game kind of or something, and like the idea that you can answer a live stream riddle in the stream comments, like it's kind of cool,
And that kind of engagement is priceless. So we're running a 32 character single elimination bracket over the course of the campaign, and we have a live stream show every Thursday. And so the fans are able to vote for these head-to-head matchups for all their favorite characters to decide who would be the most victorious character, who would make it to the end. And so that's also kind of informed how we've designed the campaign, so everything fits in. So when we talk about the riddles, riddle pillar featured in the first season of the show. But now when we do that live stream, we're able to introduce that riddle and then say to people, hey, the most ridiculous or left field answer possible out there not only is going to get a cool digital reward for picking that, but they're going to choose the battleground for our next head-to-head showdown with these characters. And and that kind of, people remember that. Now they're going to engage every time. They feel like it's important. They feel like they're a part of it. They feel like they're affecting the story. And that for us is so crucial, to have people actively involved, not just passively observing.
I think it really comes down to those emotions and what people are feeling when they come to the Kickstarter. And even just looking here, like at your $100 tier, the Elvish Master, you have so many things that you're delivering at this tier. And I notice you also then state the retail value of that. And it seems like you're getting a ton of stuff, like a ton of value for that just simple $100 tier, like way more than $100 in value. Was that kind of like pre-planned that you were thinking about how can we, bundle something where people are getting a really good deal there?
Yeah, and that always comes down to the math. You'll notice, for example, that we have, I think, 3 or 4 different $100 tiers. And then what we do is at the $250 level, to even increase on that value, we say, okay, you get everything from every one of these tiers. You had to choose before, but you jump up a level, now you get all of it, plus this additional bonus reward. So it's all stacked very carefully for the people who can afford it, for them to be able to say, wow, there's so much perceived value with this. Plus, of course, there's the emotional investment that they've made in renewing the show and making it possible. Now, part of why we list the retail and the service values, so I was involved with and consulted with the state of Washington when they were developing their rules in the Department of Revenue for how to tax crowdfunding campaigns. And so I also state those very specifically for tax reasons, because I now understand those rules inside out, and I'm able to make sure that we're playing by every single rule that we need to, and that if there's ever an audit, there will be no question at all. We've said exactly what people are getting, and we're able to break out the retail and the services and what the state of Washington calls, quote, non-taxable.
Yeah. So from what I understand, we don't have to get into this fully, just really quick question. From what I understand, something when you're like getting $50 and you're getting a mug back, that's considered more of a gift, versus if it's more in line with like what the actual retail value would be, like you're spending $15 and a book is, $10, you'd probably be taxable on that. Is that kind of what your takeaway was?
Well, you're going to find that that's going to vary depending on where you are. I'm consulting on a Canadian crowdfunding campaign right now, and the tax rules are totally different. So I would say look at your state, look at your province, look at wherever you are, see what their rules are, and then do your very best to abide by them.
Well said. Very diplomatic answer there as well. I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to my friends at The Gadget Flow. Their product discovery platform reaches 22 million people per month. They've helped more than 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns thus far, and they have a social media following of more than 700,000 followers. If you want to gain access to their marketplace and list your own product, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today. As you're going through this project, one of the things I think that's really difficult is always the slump of death, basically.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're there right now.
Yeah, the mid-campaign lull. And even someone who has had a lot of different projects, that's something also that I think that you're struggling with a little bit. And I'd love it if you could maybe share some of your thoughts on that. And is there really any way to get through that? Right.
So I've done this enough times that, again, comes down to the math. I'm very aware of where we are at each stage. Like at this point, I figure if we're making $1,000 to $3,000 a day during the lull, we'll be in pretty good shape. But that's a huge, the message that's difficult during this period to just keep hammering is we've got to pledge, we've got to pledge, we've got to pledge. they know this, but there's no urgency yet. And that's a big part of why we've now introduced this live stream bracket competition during the show. We're giving people an emotional reason to stay engaged over the course of the campaign because they care about these characters, because they've made their predictions for the entire bracket. And so my hope is that this will push engagement and visibility in a far more kind of organic, exciting way than us just hitting on Facebook every day. Have you pledged yet? Have you pledged yet? Have you pledged yet?
Yeah, because that message gets super old. And even like stretch goals, I don't think they hold as much urgency as they used to. Like, obviously, it's exciting if you're going towards a stretch goal. But having that emotional engagement, I think, can really level things up.
Yeah. Well, and there's such a huge difference between campaigns that are based on physical product and campaigns like this one. When you're doing physical product, it's so much easier to build a stretch goal snowball and to create, especially if you're dealing with molds and plastics in any way. You can add so much value to the rewards as you get into stretch goals that people come on board just because they don't want to miss out. And that's much harder to do when the value that we're adding in stretch goals is, hey, we have another half day on set. Hey, we can do more coffee for the cast and crew. Hey, we've increased the quality of this particular special effect.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You kind of have like this unique view, I think, of not only being a creative type and then having to sort of shift to the entrepreneurial role, but now you're also consulting and helping, campaign creators. In your experience, having worked with some of these individuals, do you have any things that come up that you'd like to share with the audience here? Maybe words of wisdom or anything like that?
Well, so right now I'm consulting on a really awesome campaign, and everyone should go and pledge for it because it's cool and they need the help, called Badass Chicks. It's about women in motocross, and it's a narrative series. Super cool, worldwide audience. It's another case where no one has done media for this audience and about these people yet. And so there's a ton of excitement for it, but it's an audience that isn't familiar with Kickstarter. And so what I always start off with is I say, you've got to build your mailing list. You have to engage people beforehand and get them ready to pledge on day one. And so we went through that whole process with this audience, and we got the numbers where I wanted them on the mailing list and launched the campaign, and crickets. And what we're discovering is even after months of emailing and talking with and kind of having engagement with that audience, they still hadn't made that crucial connection that the show will only happen if they step up. And I think that's ultimately the key, is empowering the audience as early as possible with the message that it's on them. If they want this to happen, they have the power to renew or to cancel the show. And that's, it's a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. And without that empowerment, people will sit back and think, oh, cool, I'm so glad this is going to happen, and not realize that we're counting on them.
How do you think you communicate that? Like, obviously you can just say, hey, this isn't going to happen unless you guys donate or you pledge. Do you think there's any ways that you can actually cause that to happen?
So the big strategy that we've used at Zombie Orpheus, beginning with the very first episode of JourneyQuest when it hit YouTube in 2010, we had a little video that played at the very end of our episode that said, no studio, no network, no cancellation. This show is creator distributed and fan supported. And I figured, we'd attach that to the episodes and people would kind of get it eventually, and we'll start asking for money in a few months. People saw that video and were emailing us on day one saying, give me a way to throw money at you now.
Wow. That's very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason was for the people who lived through the 2000s, who lived through trying to save Firefly, Veronica Mars, Jericho, Farscape, all these kind of beloved shows where there were these huge campaigns to try to save them with the networks, and the networks didn't care. I knew that message would immediately resonate with these people, that they wanted their voices to matter. And we were telling them, your voices do matter and you are empowered and this is on you. And I think it's finding that message for your audience. It's getting into where have they felt disempowered in the past, understanding how that works, and then crafting a message that re-empowers them.
Mm-hmm.
And that evokes those prior experiences and says, now we can do more together.
I think a lot of what you do seems to be really focused around that unique experience for the audience member, as well as even from like just having the audience see themselves in the characters that are on screen, being hyper aware of almost giving them that access as well as empowering them, and also just being completely conscious of what their experience is like throughout the entire campaign. You know, paying attention to their emotions, paying attention to how they perceive it. It's really putting yourself in their shoes, kind of.
It's that. I think the other piece of it, if you look through the campaign, you probably saw a section at the bottom that called social responsibility, and where we essentially kind of outlined a set of expectations for how we would be in community together. And I think it's important to let people know, yes, you feel empowered, but you are also safe to be yourself here, and we will create an environment where you are not attacked for who you are. And so, at least from my perspective, it's so crucial to take an active hand in creating healthy communities and not allowing trolls and bigots to control the conversation.
Yeah, or they just be like totally out of left field talking about topics that, you know, are just riling people up, you know, that aren't even related. I think that's
right.
It's like almost like all great communities have a bit of curation involved.
Yes.
And also someone kind of, you know, having my own forum, there's so many people that just come in, it's hard to police it, but it's so important to maintain the sanctity or to maintain the positivity of the community, of course. I want to ask you here, while I have you, when it comes to the Patreon campaign, so you have this one specific approach with Kickstarter, you've been evolving it over the years, you're also now helping other people. Patreon is kind of like a different beast. Can you talk a little bit about that, of how Patreon is different with the marketing than Kickstarter?
I'm going to speak very candidly here. We're in a strange position because we were, like I said before, we were doing Kickstarter before Kickstarter, and we were doing Patreon years before Patreon. I was managing something very similar using WordPress, but was just spending all of my time dealing with programming. My belief is that the way that a platform is created dramatically influences the culture of that platform, and as that changes, it changes the culture. We've seen that on YouTube. YouTube is designed for engagement. What engages people? The most hateful clickbaity content you can imagine. What engages people on Facebook? You can kind of go down the list. I was actually very frustrated, and I'm getting to your point. I was very frustrated when Kickstarter came along because it was based on a different set of assumptions than we had started out with. And it changed the culture from, hey, I'm thrilled to support the show directly, to I expect to be rewarded for supporting this show. And, we went with it because I appreciate not having to spend all the time programming my own crowdfunding platform. And the scale and size and scope of the Kickstarter audience and the Kickstarter brand is very valuable to us. We're in a similar boat with Patreon, where we migrated over there due to fan demand and because I was tired of programming. But Patreon has had a very difficult time figuring out who they are and who they want to serve, especially since they took on so much venture capital. And we've seen them make numerous missteps over the years, where they've been trying to balance the desires of the people who want an exit and who want to make a whole lot of money off of this, versus the desire to serve the relationship between the creators and their supporters. So ultimately, to answer your question about Patreon, My feeling is that what is required for success on that platform on a large scale is not something that I'm interested in doing. I view Patreon as it's a rock in the middle of the stream that we're on for the moment. It is not a long-term solution for the kind of ongoing support that we want to offer. And because of the venture capital involved, unlike Kickstarter, they are not a public benefit corporation, as far as I know. Because of that capital involved and because of their situation, I'm even hesitant to tell people to get involved with that platform. If you can use it, great. But ultimately, it's so important to be able to control and to manage your own audience. And Patreon is a barrier between us and them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think it's one of those things where whenever you take on venture capital dollars, your decisions kind of change, and you also go onto a bit of a runway, and you're almost forced into sacrificing a bit of the values you might have had before that, because you now have other interested parties, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
For those that are interested in like getting started with Patreon, is it almost a little bit different in terms of like with Kickstarter, there's this whole launch. With Patreon, is it more of just like a trickle, like over time you sort of grow your following there?
I'm honestly probably not the best person to answer that question because we haven't put the energy into growing our Patreon. We tend to make between $5,000 and $7,000 a month. We're on a downward slope right now because there's always natural attrition. So sometime this year, I need to go out and remind the fan base, hey, we have this. This is how we keep going. We'd love to have some more pledges. But I don't feel like I've solved Patreon in the same way that I've solved Kickstarter. So I would say, look at the people who are successful, look at what kind of content they're creating. And in many cases, what you will see, especially for the month-to-month campaigns, is they're going to be based on people who can turn around content very quickly. They're going to be based on personalities. They're going to be based on kind of ongoing engagement, which is a very different model from us, where we're making really high-end kind of premium narrative video content that comes out a few times a year.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, definitely. Okay, so my last question for you here is, I think you've accomplished a lot in, relatively short amount of time. And you've also done a lot of different things, going from being interested in videography to then, having your own sort of say on the operations and the entrepreneurial side and doing different platforms and different types of work and consulting. I always find that with me, people looking from the outside assume I do everything myself, but it's always about finding those talented people and sort of creating teams around you. Do you have any thoughts on leadership or on finding full-time help or anything that you've learned there?
The lesson that took me the longest to learn is that the people who are the most eager to help may not be the people who are the best choice to bring in to help.
Why is that?
It comes back to the double-edged sword. When people are incredibly eager and passionate, they're eager and passionate about the idea that's in their head of how something should work. And what I'm looking for is buy-in on, we're on a 20-year plan. We're a very long-term vision for what we want to accomplish, gradually laying groundwork. And I need to work with people who understand that it isn't just about, hey, here's a shiny thing that we could do tomorrow. It's how do we build a foundation that's going to give us long-term sustainability to tell amazing stories. And so the people who maybe initially look like, wow, this is who I want to work with, because they're willing to put in a lot of work for not a lot of pay, may not ultimately be the people who are going to be on board with that long-term vision. So talk about the core values and where you're going with people, rather than just saying, wow, I'm overwhelmed. Thank goodness this person is willing to step in and help me right now.
I think it kind of also starts with the evolution of the business. Like in the beginning, you kind of just got to accept help where you can get it, And it's really difficult, I think, to find those like key players who do buy into your vision. Every once in a while it happens, but but like you kind of maybe just have to rely on like freelancers or, hired guns, just kind of doing the job a bit. And as you progress, you then begin to surround yourself more with those people that do have that extreme buy-in with your vision and what it is you're trying to accomplish long term. It's kind of like a privilege almost of doing well, I think, in the beginning. What are your thoughts on that?
For sure. And I mean, there's also, I'll give you an example. So 2013 was the worst year of the business for me. I felt like I was going crazy. I felt like no one understood what I was saying. Like I was messing everything up. Like every relationship was just horribly damaged beyond repair. I was in the hospital for stress. Was having a rotten time, and I couldn't figure out what was going wrong because my memory wasn't working as far as I could tell. And the reality that I was within just didn't make sense. 4 years later, the person I had been working with at that time approached me and said, "You know what? I have to apologize to you. I was intentionally gaslighting you that year and was telling you things that weren't true in an effort to hurt you."
What? Oh my gosh. That's horrible, man.
Like, I thought my brain was broken, and it turns out there was someone who was maliciously
had an agenda, who was messing
with me and with my relationships with the support of a couple of other people.
That's crazy. I don't even know why people do that. Like, they're just, number one, it's a waste of time, but it's also just really bad karma. Like,
yeah,
it's disgusting.
Yeah. So, and that's, it comes down. So at this point, I would say keep good written records. And when something doesn't make sense, I'm all about empathy, and I tend to always be looking at other people and what their needs are. And I think had I been better at looking at myself and questioning, maybe I'm not crazy, I would have been able to catch what was going on way sooner. So having the tools and the support network with people who you do trust, who can help you assess when things go wrong in bizarre ways.
Yeah, that's so important. I think it's also just kind of the evolution that we go through as people and as human beings and as business owners. You tend to, you sort of find out where your blind spots are, and you learn to, always be positive and such, but also to do the diligence, behind the scenes. And it's kind of just how it is, unfortunately. But I thank you so much for, sharing that. I think that was really vulnerable. And also considering all the success that you've had, I think that's great that the audience can still learn that even so, you always have to be pushing, you always have to be learning on this journey. So I appreciate that, man. And you've shared so much great tips and advice in this interview. Where can people go to learn more about your current campaign?
Awesome. So if you go to renewjourneyquest.com or look for JourneyQuest on any social media platform, or hey, on Kickstarter, just basically search for JourneyQuest. It will pop up. Our SEO is really good. Also, I would say if you're at all into sports, if you're into stories of women breaking their way into male-dominated industries, go look for Diaries of Badass Chicks on Kickstarter. It could absolutely use the boost, and they're doing such good work there.
And also, when you're looking up JourneyQuest, be sure to watch the video. It's pretty well done. It's also kind of funny, really interesting costumes. So you did a good job with that video. So make sure you guys go and watch the video. Ben, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing all those great tips, and giving all your campaigns. We'll probably have you back at some point.
Awesome. Thanks for the invitation.
Let me tell you about our latest sponsor, SendPro Online by Pitney Bowes. Shipping can be complex. Things can get really confusing really fast. With SendPro Online, it's easy to save time and money no matter what you send, from letters and packages to overnights and flats. You can easily compare USPS, UPS, and FedEx in an all-in-one online tool. You can print shipping labels and stamps directly from your printer. You can even track all of your shipments and get email notifications when they've arrived. SendPro Online is only $14.99 a month, and listeners can get a free 30-day trial when you visit pb.com/crowdcrux. That's pb.com/crowdcrux. Experience the convenience of SendPro Online for yourself when you sign up for a free 30-day trial. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman. Thank you for joining me today on the podcast episode, and that you took something away, whether it's tactical advice or strategy, or it could even just be a little bit of inspiration, I think, from this individual entrepreneurial approach to raising money successfully for many different campaigns over the years, as well as some of his lessons on business and leadership and these different things. I hope that you enjoyed today's podcast episode. I also told you that if you are interested in working with me one-on-one, I would give you a way to do that at the end of the episode. So here is the way. If you want to book a one-on-one coaching session with me, with Sal, and you want to talk about, number one, the launch strategy that's going to go into your specific project. Doesn't matter what type of product you have. Could be a book, could be something creative like a play, could be even a comic book, etc. Or it could be more of a entrepreneurial technology gadget or a gizmo design product, something like that. I've worked with so many different campaigns over the years, hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs and different stories with varying resource levels, etc. If you're interested in getting a tailored approach for your specific project, as well as talking about what you got to do in order to smash your goal, answer any kind of questions that you have about this crowdfunding process, get into the resources that you can take advantage of, maybe some other people in the industry you should be talking to. And this is kind of, I use this as not only feedback, but also a consultation if you are interested in also having me help personally with your crowdfunding campaign in a larger way. So you can go to this link and you can book an hour-long intensive coaching call with me, and we can get that squared away ASAP. That link is crowdcrux.com/coaching. That is crowdcrux.com/coaching, crowdcrux.com/coaching. Just go to that link. Tell me a little bit about you, what you're passionate about, what you're trying to raise money for, what your fundraising goal is going to be, and also the type of product that you have, of course. After, we can right away book that coaching call. We can get this squared away. It can also give you some homework and action items. And this is a really great way to set up your campaign for success and also take advantage of all of the knowledge and accumulation and the learnings that I've had over the last several years. I'm getting older, man. I am getting older. This is year number, I think 6 or 7, honestly, in the industry since 2012. So about 6 years. Geez, time flies. So again, that link, crowdcrux.com/coaching. Hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. Stay tuned for the next one, and also leave a rating on review on iTunes if you have not already. I will see you next time.